you have so many people out there, they'll do an engagement at a company and then they'll take the lessons that they learned from some corporate engagement and think
Mm-hmm.
that that will apply to forensics or nation state stuff and things of that nature. But what they forget over and over and over again is that at least from my experience, the kind of stuff that you see from home computers is closer to what you see from a corporate perspective than corporate security is to government security.
Right. Yeah. Now that makes sense.
This is, I guess, one of the things that boggles my mind is when you have someone go through and say, oh, no, this firmware stuff, it's so low level and so complicated or intriguing or what have you, it always makes me wonder how much they understand IT in general.
Yeah.
All they're doing is making API calls. And again, as you know, I
Yeah. I know
mean,
what you mean. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So,
Not the API calls you make from the web.
right, that's exactly right. And so I'm looking at it and I'm going, this is just application security. Let's be honest. You just
Yeah.
have to understand the quirks of the API. You have to understand what they're calling and what that means. It's no different than if you're working in C, understanding what a call to memcopy does
Mm-hmm.
or what have you. It's the exact same thing. It's understand the APIs that you are calling and what the ramifications of those calls are. If you don't understand what they are, you can't secure it. If you
Yeah.
do, you can secure it.
Yeah, I mean, you can pretty much look up the man pages and
Mhm.
references of these calls. So it just it makes it very interesting. Like I said, it wasn't new to me, but just some of the architecture things, I had to refresh my memory, and then I'm like, wait. Then you start to see that there's
Right.
different levels and rings
Right.
for all of the different architectures, and I'm just like, that's insane. So
Yeah.
it was to me was kind of learning some things over again, and I'm just like, that makes sense. I remember this from the last thing, but as far as actually finding the vulnerabilities, I was like, that's child's play. Like when he was talking about it being complicated, like
Yeah.
complex vulnerabilities, it's not complex. It may be complex for him or other people, but it's not as complex for people who do application security because you should know what you're looking at. I mean, as we would know, most of these drivers are not written, securely. So they're going to have buffer overflows and
Right.
all these different things. But it's just kind of funny when people say low level. To me, it's like, okay, I understand it's low level because we're using C and we get to,
Right.
basically touch some of the close to the hardware we can, but
Right.
get to do different things with that, right? But to me, I look at it, I'm like, this is still high level. We're not really touching the metal.
Right.
Now we're getting that close. But I mean, that was it was interesting, but it's kind of hard now trying to find new things to actually dive into and learn because of the data that's out there it's not new. Nothing's new under the sun, but it's it's just the same old stuff.
Yeah.
Like again, when we talked about insecurity civilization before, as I told you, it was always a cookie, that may have been base 64 encoded and it's binary or whatever, and then you're kind of looking at, oh, is admin and all this. It's never anything different. So you're ignorant to the
Right.
fact, and then you feel stupid because you're not able to find that vulnerability itself. Like, how, as I told you before, you kind of explained it to me, I was never finding insecurity civilization, and I probably, it was there. I got an understanding because I've serialized and deserialized things being a developer, but I would never find these vulnerabilities because I did not understand per se what the hell I was looking for. And then when you go online, this is what it shows you. So you're looking for whatever it exactly show you because you think that's what it is, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think maybe to that point, so one of the things that Corey said, and I actually made this a short, was he was explaining his view on learning from security professionals versus learning from developers. And I mean, it made me think a few things. Number one, it was very sad to hear in general because it was rather damning toward security professionals.
Yeah.
But it also reminded me of a basic fact that I guess I already knew, which is that I think in a lot of ways we teach incorrectly. Our industry teaches incorrectly.
Yeah.
So recently there was a discussion where they were talking about, what was it? Unsafe storage, local storage, and similar concepts. The things like writing sensitive data to logs,
Yeah.
or writing sensitive data to local storage, etc., etc., etc. And I always cringe when I see the rationale people give behind this, or when they say, "Oh, well, this is a low." Actually, perfect example when we talk about the information disclosure. So where a server is going through and bleeding architectural data, telling you what the server is, telling you what upstream servers are, what ports things are running on, if it's in their TLS certificates, for example, if it has private IP addresses, if the load balancer is announcing itself. All of this I've seen people put as informational or low. And it makes me sad because it tells me where they are and how much they know about the real world.
Yeah. But see, you had to think about it this way. Remember, we had this conversation, especially if you're a tester and you have no say so, and they don't know better that these things should not be a low severity. A lot of the things that they look as informational and low is like if it's like okay, it says it's a deserialization error, and then that's all they kind of really say. But that they say is like detailed messages, or they'll try to label it, and that's something I was like, okay, maybe that's not a big deal, but for things that is telling you paths information,
Right.
their server, their class names, all of these different things, that's letting me know what they're using on the back end. That gives me so much information to understand how I can attack it,
Mhm.
which and to me that is not a low severity.
Yes.
That could be medium. It could, and depending on what else you get,
Right.
as we seen with the super vulnerable jobber application, you could probably get even more, some secrets, some things that spill out of the shit, and it could be high, it could be critical, you never know. But it all depends on the circumstances, and I just think people don't really have a good idea of what they're looking at. They look at these things, write them off, and say, "Oh, showing you all of this, we should do this." But if you really, really look at the details, it really helps you understand their whole stack, their back end, what they're doing, and then how you can probably attack that system. And that's the reason why you, myself, kind of know what's going on and what they're using in the back end because of that data.
Yeah.
And most people overlook that. Even some of the senior principal level, high levels may miss it.
Yes. Okay. So I'm going to explore this in two separate ways. Actually, the first will be, so the a question was asked about the severity tied to sensitive data in storage on a mobile device.
Mm,
And
yeah,
it was being argued that it wasn't that big of a deal and it seemed like a silly thing, because someone would have to physically gain access to your mobile phone, right?
yeah,
And this is the same exact issue as the one we were just discussing, where it is a lack of understanding as to what happens in the real world and a lack of understanding, I think, of the system itself. So, a mobile phone, depending on the phone, but typically by default, is going to back itself up to the cloud, right? You know this, I
yeah,
know
yeah,
this.
yeah.
The most common thing to occur isn't your phone getting compromised, it's someone gaining access to your cloud, your iCloud, the Apple Cloud, whatever you want to call it, or what have you, and then downloading the data from that. And I recently had a case of a woman who was being stalked, her and her family, and they were trying to get $100 out of her. It's just, you're like,
Yeah,
$100?
no,
Right. You know where they live based on how much they're charging. That kind of gives you a
uh,
hint, right?
right, right.
In her case, They never compromised her phones. They compromised her cloud, and then she was using Apple devices, and they used that to then restore one of the backups of her phones onto one of their devices. Now, her phone, of course, had access to the security cameras for the house, to give you an example. So they're staring at the data live, the security camera data on her house. And they actually, not joking, not exaggerating, they used that, for example, to pull the credit card numbers off of a credit card that was lying on the fireplace.
Yeah.
And then they ordered pizza to her house and sent it to her house. And then I guess they were ordering, I think it was OnlyFans and some hotel and some
Oh
air
my
trip.
God.
Yeah, right. Well, and all of that was more to get her attention and scare the
Yeah.
daylights out of her so that she'd pay them. That was
For
really
a
the
hundred
point.
dollars.
I know,
So
for
you
one
went through
hundred
all that
dollars.
just to get $100? I'm
I
sorry,
know.
that's a lot. I mean, I mean, I'm assuming they lived in Africa somewhere,
It,
somewhere where they may be, you know. But that's insane.
mm-hmm.
And but that's a good, that's very good information because again, maybe some people find sensitive data, and as you stated that clients or even some of the people that QA these things don't understand the ramifications of this issue,
Yes.
and they'll look, oh well, we already had a phone, so if
Right.
you get access to that, then it doesn't matter. So why are we even talking
Right.
about
The
this?
phone is rooted, and you have to have physical access.
But it's not hard to do any of those things. That's just, and I'm gonna get to this other argument because it's the same similar idea I think about when we talk about this, but I think a lot of the times with testers, they don't know how to explain it, but they also don't have the background as you do with digital forensics to understand what comes into play and how easy it is and where this stuff can, be sent to or where these things can be, backed up to. You just never know.
Mhm.
And then most people who get their phone, they don't know that you automatically, it
Right.
doesn't, you don't know how to turn it off. They don't
Right.
do any of these things. It just automatically goes to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody gets access to that, then game is over.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing, a good thing for people to understand, and that's knowing the devices, knowing your system will help you. When you're trying to explain or trying to say why something is a higher severity than what it is. Because if you don't know the system very well, trying to explain it to somebody or the client, they're going to always beat you down because they're like, hey, they don't want this finding on their report. Second of all, they normally don't even want to secure it.
Right.
Third of all, they leave it on to the customer or the people who have the devices. It's on them. It's
Right.
not their problem when it really is, and in all these different things. So it just amazes me. But again, once you start learning and knowing the system, you get better. Now, I wanted to also put this together with something else that I always hear is that why you get some traffic and you get HTTP headers and get all of these different things. And then people are saying, well, you can't call this out. Like, for instance, people still use basic authentication. Well, you
Right.
can't call this out because it's encrypted. And, if you can decrypt it, then, that who
Right.
cares?
Right. You
All of these
have to
things.
have compromised the
Yeah,
HTTPS channel in order to do this.
but it's not hard to do.
Right. You're right. It's easy to grab the data from a choke point. And most organizations have that choke point, and typically it's going to be a web proxy. It's ridiculously common for people to compromise a network and go straight for those choke points. I don't give a damn about your workstation. I care about your web proxy. The second I see that, my ears are up and I'm headed straight for that web proxy. I'm going to take that puppy out and I'm going to sit on it all day, every day, because I will see every password that goes through. Because everyone stupidly has their web proxy man in the middle of everything. So I see
Yeah.
all your credentials and everything, you know.
Everything goes through that. And that's why we complain about with the cache control headers and these things
Mm-hmm.
that this stuff can be stored during your proxy logs, any of these things, and nobody's paying attention to that. And that's why a lot of the headers and different things we're suggesting are important. But it just saddens me that people don't understand what goes on in the real world because, as I said before in previous episodes before, a lot of people who are in security have never done it
Yeah.
in a real world scenario.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not telling anybody on here to go ahead and do criminal stuff or activity. What I'm saying is, if you have never done it, seen it, been around it, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, one of the guys that we know stated that the malware team, or
Yeah.
over in these different areas, are like superior.
Yeah.
But if you knew how to write malware in the real world, then you know that writing malware is a joke. It's not hard. And then the methodology that they follow to do things is not hard. It's not hard to write ransomware.
Right.
I mean, that's why the hell we're seeing it. Even if they do it poorly,
Which
it's
they
still
do.
not hard to write. Yeah.
You're
So
right.
so it's insane. It bothers me.
I, I think in a lot of this, I wind up looking at it and I go, we spend so much time telling people how to, in our industry, how to secure things and teaching other security professionals how to secure things, and also on the flip side how to break things, but we don't spend much time explaining for real and honestly the whys. So they make this stuff up. You see the same thing actually in martial arts all the time, like
Yeah,
for
yeah.
kata. Yeah, so Okinawa
Hmm.
martial arts, so Taekwondo, so on and so forth, they'll have these forms. And people don't understand the forms because actually, if you ask, and there are quotes from old masters where they would talk about how, oh, well, I don't actually understand what this form means. I was taught to do it and I never asked. And now my master's dead. And this guy was born in the 1800s. So at this point, he's very old. He has no clue. So then you get all these people trying to recreate it and figure it out and make it up. And as a result, you get really weird interpretations that blow my mind when I watch them because they're nonsensical. The problem is we have the same thing going on within our industry, but the worst part is the people who can tell you aren't dead and they're actively in security. You just have to walk down the hall and go talk to some forensics professionals. That's it.
Man, that's why I said. But a lot of the security professionals don't even know the whys. So
Yeah.
you know, being able, like, again, being able to talk to somebody who's on both sides and understand why these things happen, like with you
Right.
doing forensics, it just blows my mind because you get a very good understanding of why these things are happening, what happened. Even me, even though I haven't done forensics, as much, I've still been on the blue team side, and I kind of understand when I'm explaining, and I'm like, I've seen this happen, so I know that these things happen. I had to do administration and I've done all of these different areas and hats. So I've seen it happen. So when I am explaining or doing these attacks, I'm like, I've seen this happen. This
Hmm.
is done. But then you get people like, well, no, why would they do that? That doesn't make any sense. They have no imagination, no experience, hadn't done none of this, which is a problem on why a lot of the people who are in security, why they're not good.
Yeah.
I mean, they have no real experience, and then think that's what it is, and it, it's not. So to me, I think a lot of the professional security professionals today, I think it's good to be able to have different hats and have experienced those different things. So when you do become a penetration tester, you have a great idea of all these different areas and how things work,
Right.
especially having that foundation in computer science. But you've done these things, you understand, and you can talk to the administrators, the developers, all of these different areas because you understand it. But most of them don't.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And to your point, if you spent some time either doing administration or talking to an administrator, just to give an easy example, you would understand why information disclosure is a medium. I'll give you a good example from a recent engagement that I had. There was a system that was bleeding the load balancer, which was Nginx. It told us it was Nginx. It also bled that they had Nginx talking to Apache, Apache sitting on 127.0.0.1 port 80. It was obvious that the system behind Apache HTTPD was Tomcat because I know what the markers are.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, there was another system because they actually had two branches of this, and that one had the same exact stack, except instead of Tomcat, they were running Express.js. So I found that the system incorrectly handled exceptional cases, where if I sent it a very specific payload, Tomcat, the application running in Tomcat would die rudely, and it would rudely cut the connection. When Tomcat rudely cuts the connection, Apache's connection is severed, and Apache screams and rudely cuts the connection for the load balancer. Now, Nginx then screamed 502'd saying, hey, the connection was rudely terminated, so I couldn't do this thing. Now, you may ask, why in the world do I care about any of this? And the answer is, if you understand the way application load balancers work, it was actually very easy to create denial of service attack and then test it out so that we figured out how to down the system with one single request and then keep that system down where the load balancer shuts off every single server behind it by sending a request every 10 seconds. And you may ask why 10 seconds. And the answer is actually very simple. 10 seconds was fast enough that any server that was coming on, because of course it's a load balanced environment and you have all these different servers being ripped down, any server coming online would see that request, hit it 502, and it would get ripped down rudely by the load balancer because the load balancer was saying, hey, this server's unhealthy. A very simple denial of service. And the easiest way to have done all of that and figured all of this out rather than by pure luck would be understanding the stack and then monitoring and following through. And you've seen numerous times where I sit there and I say, okay, well, I knew that this was vulnerable to this, this, and this because I understand what's running. It's running C#. And I know how C# serializes and deserializes. And it's running Newton Soft JSON, just to give an easy example. And I understand the way Newton Soft JSON library happens to operate. Now, how do I know it's Newton Soft? Because I know what the markers are. And the system is bleeding enough data. You know, I see that it's IIS, I see that it's ASP.NET or .NET Core or what have you, and I know it's taking JSON. I know what the most common libraries are, and I know what those libraries look like. I see that library based on how it's serializing and deserializing. I know how to attack this. The same thing is true the second I see JSON ID in a cookie. I know what your server is. You know what your server is, and heaven help you if you have it do the default where it tacks on dot and then the host name, because now I know which host I'm attacking. And you may ask why that's useful, and the answer is quite simple. I think you've seen it where a server gets compromised. In a load balanced system, if an attacker can't tell that there are multiple servers and which one got compromised and they drop a web shell on it, they're going to be annoyed as hell because
Yeah.
they try to hit and my shell's not there. So
Now you got to
life,
figure it out.
yes, and life is so much easier if something about the system is telling them what instance is responding so that they know what instance is compromised so that they can either know to compromise the other ones or that, hey, I need to do a reverse shell because I don't want to play this game.
Yeah, like that's why it's good to know the system. And that's why the information disclosures, verbose error messaging, whatever you want to call it, are very important. And that's why they should be a medium. And like I said, they could be higher depending on what
Sometimes they
information
can
you
be,
get.
yeah.
But it definitely does not warrant a low or informational because a lot of people again don't know what they're looking at. They
Right.
just see this stack of information and say, "Oh, well, they shouldn't be doing this. Let's mark it down." But that's why you miss a lot of findings because you don't know what the error message is telling you and what
Yes.
it's giving you. Like, for instance, most people with the, what is it, GraphQL,
Right.
they'll look at it and say, "Oh, I don't know what this really means." But if you really look at some of the stuff it's giving you, you might find SQL injection, you might find regular expression injection, you might find just a lot of different things that you don't that you've never or didn't know was there because you were testing it out.
Right.
And it gave you all of the information. That's how I knew that one system had regular expression injection. I was like, oh, it told me that it's using regular expression. It said that this is not the right syntax or the right thing for regular expression in this system and this whatever it's using. And I'm like, oh, great. So let me try something that's regular expression based. And then next thing you know, it just gave me everything I wanted. So I mean, it's very important. And I just think that a lot of security professionals lack the knowledge and understanding of why these things are important, especially with the reflection stuff that we found, you know, and it gave us all of this information. And they're like, well, that doesn't matter. It tells me that the last mod ID and this and that. And then you're like, yes, it does. Like it's literally telling you when things were modified, who it was by, and then if you correlate that ID together, you can like build an attack using insecurity civilization and reflection to do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. You are spot on. The more the system tells you about itself, the more you're able to do with it. And a lot of those telltale signs can be incredibly small. But the thing is, real world attackers are using that stuff all of the time. All of the time. How many times have you seen where someone finds a vulnerability and all they do is they go to Shodan or whatever and they just look up anytime someone has a header or a flag that happens to correspond with whatever they think is vulnerable?
Yeah, yeah. And then I mean, you just gotta understand what you're looking at, and I think people miss that. I
Mhm.
mean, that's the point of playing around. Most people call it fuzzing, as you know, we don't care for that word, but that's the whole part of playing around with the information or playing around with the requests and stuff, so you can understand what's going on. So, like, I really love seeing that data because that's like, oh yeah, here's what I have, here's what I can do. And
Yep.
now I love seeing, I told you the last thing, well, last two times where I'm like, holy shit, okay, this parser is doing this, and it's basically calling this path, which allows me to also attack or like add on another path
Right.
to get more information or change things or upload things or do things, which is insecure deciliation.
Right.
But most people don't know that. And I would have never known that if it wasn't for our demonstration that, DaRon had put on for the insecurity civilization and checking different parsers and understanding how the parser actually works.
Right.
That is crucial. Like, again, goes back to understanding the technology at hand. If you don't understand it, you'll miss a lot of vulnerabilities there
Yeah.
because you don't understand it. So that was crucial. And now every time I look at a system, it's like, oh, this is here. Oh, I didn't think that was here. And then people will say, oh, that was very simple. That was easy, but then won't even find it.
Right.
Or no, that can't be insecurity civilization because you're not using why so serial and you don't have this gadget and that. And it's like, what do you mean? It's being serialized and then deserialized. How do you get an object? How do you create an object?
Yes,
Right?
if you
So
know anything about serialization, deserialization, marshaling, and unmarshaling, then you understand that's what this is. Mass assignment is nothing more than insecure deserialization. Period. That's it.
yeah, and most people don't get that right. Of
Mm-mm.
course, we talked about how our industry just name and makes up shit. You have people that state that they're making trends and all of this, and that's what you get into. Like security is everybody they take something old and try to make something new out of it, and then make their own name, and it's the same shit.
Right.
Like it makes no sense.
Right.
It's stupid. But
Yeah.
again, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but
And a lot of it just comes down to an inability to understand how to abstract their knowledge, abstract what they're seeing, and then reuse it. Look, attacking PDF generators has been around as long as the PDF generators have been around. Hell, attacking PDF readers is in the same boat. I remember we were doing exploits for PDF readers back in what, 2000, and sooner than
Yeah.
that. That's what you did. It's not new. Input injection is input injection, and that's why we talk about proper input validation. And that is actually where 90%, oh, actually, if I remember correctly, it was over 90% of all vulnerabilities come from, is failure to properly validate input. That is SQL injection, SOQL injection, which of course is Salesforce, LDAP injection, you name it, it's all the same thing, but it's also remote code execution. It's insecure deserialization. It's insecure serialization, but that's in the other direction. It's
Mhm.
all of this stuff combined, and I don't care what language you're injecting. Injection is injection.
Yeah, and then people don't understand, and that's the root cause of a lot of things, even with buffer overflows. I mean, of
Mm-hmm.
course, there's more to it, but they're not even validating or checking these things, so it allows you to do whatever you want.
Right.
So, if we fixed a lot of input validation issues, then a lot of this issues that we have now, vulnerabilities, probably wouldn't exist.
Right.
But we're gonna always have that problem, correct? So it's never gonna change. But again, like just understanding these things. And again, if you guys haven't, you should definitely go play with the super vulnerable job application, because again, you won't get none of the stuff that you get from that application. You won't see it online. I guarantee you that, because I have looked everywhere and done things and I didn't know and missed a lot of things because I didn't understand, because the data's not there. You don't see it in books. You don't have none of that. But again, that goes back to understanding the parsers and the technology. Then you can understand how to manipulate and attack these things. So, you know, it it really helps. And like I
Yeah.
said, now you look at from where you may start and you look at it when you've done this, you look at some of the other systems and you notice how vulnerable and how all of these techniques are there. And
Yeah.
it may seem simple. A lot of the stuff that we're doing is simple, but it's also because we know the like the system and frameworks and stuff like that. But it for most people, they bypass it, don't even see it, or they misclassify
Right.
a vulnerability.
Right, right. Yeah, like the infamous comment about JSON and how a certain someone who was responding to an insecure deserialization finding, he couldn't understand how JSON was the problem, and I'm just like, JSON's not the problem, you know?
Yeah, he didn't understand the technology though,
No,
and but
exactly.
that goes back to my biggest problem as well in security, is that these egos,
Yeah,
these people who think that they're the best or there's nobody that's better than them, and they can't grasp that you could be better than them. And when people tell you, hey, you should take this as a learning or a time to teach that person, how can you teach somebody who won't listen?
yeah, that's true.
It doesn't matter. Like I always stated, just because you may be a black belt don't mean you can't learn from a white belt.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And then those same people eventually be the ones that get stepped over.
Yeah,
People are blowing past you because you are so idiotic that you can't grasp that there's somebody that knows more.
yeah,
So you have to put like below or belittle somebody who knows way more than you than just actually asking a question. Is it so hard to say, DaRon, I see you had this. I don't really understand how this gives you insecure deserialization. Is it a JSON issue or what is it? I'm not sure. Was it really hard to ask the question? Yes, it was, because this person can't get past that there's another person smarter than him because he was the smart person at the time.
yeah.
And it feels bad for somebody else to come in and be step over you. And it's
Right.
okay, because what he doesn't understand is we all are trying to get better.
Yes, yes, yes. We've talked about it before, and everyone's
Yeah.
ignorant about something. There's nothing wrong with not knowing something. I had someone actually look at a report and a finding of mine a few days ago, and they asked me, "Hey, I see that you had cross-site request forgery in this, and I'm looking at the course headers. How did you set the application, the content type, so that it said application in JSON. And I actually explained how to said individual. And he was surprised. He didn't know that you could do that. And there's nothing wrong with not knowing. And he asked, and I told him, there are a lot of people who wouldn't, I'm going to say, humble themselves. And I say this not to say that that's what you have to do, but at least to admit that you don't know something is to admit that you're vulnerable and be open and honest. And that's the only way you can get better. And that's what we as an industry have to do. And I say this because, again, going back to circling all the way back, by not admitting that you don't understand the way the real world works, you're never going to be able to secure a system, and you're never going to be able to penetrate it in a realistic manner.
Yeah, no, that's true. Just giving an example about letting go of your pride. Do you think that, you know, I want to be better than this guy? Okay. I want to be better. And one day I'll probably be better. But yeah, the biggest thing is that I could have just said, you know what? I don't like this person. I don't like him, because he just seems to know more and he has all of this experience. I could have just went and did that. But instead of doing that, whether people were like, oh, you're not as good as DaRon, or you're not this and you're not that, and you're never going to, I said, okay, that's great. I'm going to learn from this person
Yeah.
because obviously I want to get to where he's at. I want to understand more because obviously I'm lacking in areas and I'm missing things that are really simple. They're right there in my face. But because I don't understand and my pride won't let me just say, forget it. Hey, there's something I don't know. I need to know. I would rather just not learn and be an idiot and then
Yeah.
get like he teaches other people and they blow past me. You know, that's what happens in the industry. You get stagnant and then all of a sudden you don't make any more money, or you don't get
Yep.
better, you don't move up a
Yep.
step because
Blink of an eye.
people don't yeah, people don't want to let go of their pride. And I was like, that was the best thing for me because there wasn't anybody to learn from, and everything that was online, like I said, it's garbage.
Yeah.
It doesn't help. And a lot of the people have not updating this stuff anyway, but it's garbage. And to me, I was lacking.
Yeah.
Now versus 3 or 4 years ago, I look at myself now, I'm like, holy shit. I got the foundation. I understand things, but getting that extra help and somebody who has that experience and that eye and be able to see these things and say, hey, look, you don't see that? That's an issue there. And it's bigger than what you think. And it's like, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
that's what
not
I was
IDOR.
right, right. It blew my mind. I was just like, what the hell? And he's like, it's reflection. And I'm just like, well, I mean, I know what reflection is, but what the hell can I do with it? And then that was just amazing because now I see it everywhere, and I'm like,
And it
holy
is
shit.
everywhere.
Like, yes, it is everywhere. And we won't tell you, but it's everywhere. Trust me, they do it everywhere. All of these big companies. However, it just was amazing. And that's what I was trying to point out in that channel that we had, just stating that everybody glorifies a person who knows a lot. Like DaRon knows a lot, has a lot of experiences, and we're all trying to get that experience. But you know, people coming into this industry, they may look at that as a negative thing because they may look at themselves as they'll never get to that level, or and then that will shun them away from actually asking the question because how can I ever be this great? This guy is a god, and I think it's better to, instead of saying, hey, this guy knows everything, learn from that guy. Because really, when people call that out, I think of it and I say, well, they really are jealous of the fact that you know everything. So the only way to make themselves feel good is to give you or give that individual more credit without stating that, hey, everybody should learn from everybody because everybody has some type of skill.
Yeah.
And can help out, but that's a bad thing because nobody else has that skill or those skills.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, actually, I know something that I've heard directed at me that I always thought was really hurtful was you'd hear people say, oh, well, he's a know it all. And I'm going, I mean, so you know me, I've never ever given that attitude. I've never given off that kind of aura. I openly state there are plenty of things I don't. Hell, I tell you all the time, I so strongly admire people who can do front end development of any kind. Can I physically do it? Yes. I can't do it well. There are so many people who do it so better than I can. I can write the code and it will be fantastic code, but the user interface will look like it's from 1980. And, it'll suck and you'll hate me and you'll hate your experience on it. And I'll sit there and use it and be, but I work in the terminal all the time. I hate user, you know this. I hate user interfaces.
Mhm.
I absolutely hate graphical user interfaces, I should say. I'm command line, command line, command line, command line. That's just where I have always sat. And I also can't do graphics. I love art with a passion and I want to be able to do it. And I watch Bob Ross and we talk about that. And I love Bob
Mhm.
Ross. And I've actually been able to do some decent enough paintings watching him. My kids have done far better paintings than I did watching him. And that was when they were very young, even. I mean, I was getting my butt kicked by 8-year old daughter, for Pete's sake, kind of deal. you know, and I think that's phenomenal. See, there are a couple of things though. I recognize a lot of my strengths and weaknesses, and you don't hear me usually talk if I don't know what I'm talking about, or if it's something I may be a little unsure of. Instead, you'll hear me listen, and so I come off as a know-it-all because the only time you'll hear me talk is if it's something, one, that interests me, and two, that I actually know what the hell I'm talking about. And it's like, but I'm not a know-it-all. And the only reason why I'm even talking is because I want to impart this knowledge on you because I feel it's my responsibility to give back to others because I was given to.
And I mean, and that's a crucial thing because, that's why I stated that
Mhm.
I know you personally and know that you don't know everything. Now, again, the intimidation is the fact that people look at your resume or hear where you worked and they're like, oh, this guy has to know he has to know things. But that's what I was saying. You don't know everything. And for people that are coming in, that's intimidating. Just because you're intimidated because you don't want to ask and learn or and try to get better doesn't mean you have to make that experience for other people that way. And
Right,
people look at you and say that because they're afraid. They're intimidated of the things and I'm just like, he doesn't know everything. I mean, like again, me and you talked, I am amazing with front end. I can do back end stuff, but I could care less about the back end. I love to make beautiful, like,
yeah,
graphics, designs, and websites. That's why I wanted to be a web developer, and I work because I could do amazing front end work. It was just because I'm creative. I'm already an artist as it is, and I love that stuff. But I could give a shit less about the back end. I'll let somebody else do that. But if I had to, I can do it. It doesn't mean it'll be as pretty as DaRon, but it definitely will work.
right.
And that's the difference. You know what I'm saying? And you just got to know your weaknesses and your strengths. And it's okay. And if you suck at something, find somebody who's really good at it. I
Right.
mean, really, really good at it, has done it, and not somebody who's pretending that they just read it online and pretending that they're expert, but somebody who has the experience and understands it so you can get better.
Right.
Now, the problem is that I think as well is that you have this correlation where you have a lot of people in the industry, but how many people are really good? How many people can really become mentors or be somebody's mentor? There's not a lot.
Yeah.
So the reason you're looked at as a know-it-all is because nobody else has come in and had the same similar experience as and are humble enough to have that conversation. Because a lot of people, if they do have your experience, they're not humble.
Yeah, that's true.
They're assholes. So it's like, how many people do you have that's willing to give that knowledge? And I know when you go on to chats, you are really trying to help, but the problem is people don't want it.
Yeah.
They don't want to learn. They're fanboys. They think this person is the de facto stando whatever, but they're not. There's no table. There's no standard person who is the know-it-all, be it all. Like, you're not a god. There may be something I know how to do better, and you're like, wow, that was neat.
Yeah.
How did you do that? You know what I'm saying? But it's okay. It is okay. And again, I'm talking a lot, but again, I will go back and say that just because you want to be better than someone and be as good as someone doesn't mean you have to compare yourself to that person, because you're never going to be that person. Like, again, I told you, you could be Michael Jordan of information security or cybersecurity. I consider myself LeBron in cybersecurity. And I say that to state that, there's things that I'm weak at, there's things that I'm trying to get better at. But I'm not comparing myself to that
Right.
person. I'm just saying that that's where the level I'm at,
Right.
I feel.
Right.
And if you're that person, if you're there, that's fine. I'm just trying to be the best that I can be, the better me, the
Right.
best that I've ever been.
Right.
I'm not trying to be DaRon because my experiences are different.
Right.
I'll never be there.
Right.
I'll be this the highest level I can, but I will never be because I don't have his same experience.
Yep.
And of course, I don't look like him. Of course, he's a better looking person,
Right.
even though I still think he's, you know, I'm not going to say that here, but we know. But
Half
he's a
breed.
noob himself. Yeah, half breed. Yes, you said it better because I might get shamed because I
Yes.
say what I say. But
My grandmother
we
always
know.
used the term.
And it's okay. It's okay. But I just think it's very important because I think it makes the experience better for people coming in. And I just wish people will understand that, that you need to compare yourself to how you were then until now and see your progress and
Yeah.
set it different. You're not going to be better than your mentor. I mean, you can get better than your mentor, but you're not going to be your mentor.
Yeah.
Okay. And wish there was a good mentor program, but there's not a lot of people like yourself that actually can help, which is why we put out this content so we
Yes.
can mentor, help other people. So if anybody is looking to get help, feel free to jump in the comment section, ask questions. Don't be afraid. We don't claim to know it all, but we definitely have a lot of experience in full range of everything. DaRon has his experiences in other things. I have my experiences, and reach out. Let us know. We can always answer questions. If you're looking to get an understanding of things or get good mentors, I mean,
And
what
we
better
do
way than to do
respond.
so? Oh yes, we definitely respond with no time. So definitely, this has been our time. I'm Roniel.
I'm DaRon.
And if you haven't already, please like and comment to our channel for more episodes like this one. And again, if you're looking for people or a mentor or somebody to talk to, you can always contact us. We're always here ready to respond. Until the next time.
Have fun.